480. So we have more kids in placement this year right now than had projected for 2012. So while this is very good news, it's good news for children because we think out-of-home placement, while necessary to protect the safety of children, is also very difficult and hard on children to be placed in foster care. So we've had some success in reducing the number of children where the circumstances demand they go into foster care. At the same time, that's been a very significant budget savings and otherwise offsetting what would have been some tremendous service losses in our department if we didn't have this particular savings. But this was one of the areas, as I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, that I'm a little nervous about, that we're not quite at the number of kids I'd like us to see, like to be at this point for 2012.
Commissioner Carter, Commissioner McDonough.
On this point, thank you. I really do appreciate the good work that is being done in the department and the success that we've seen related to children and out-of-home placement, and look forward to that success continuing. I am concerned, as you are, and just want to reflect that on the 2010 actual, we were down close to 14 million, yet our projection for 2011 was at the 18.7 level. And I'm anticipating that as you watch the signs or the indicators, the places where we're investing and are able to guard against or keep children safe in their homes and from going into out-of-home placement, you're sometimes cautious about what may happen as, for example, the CCSA budget is reduced and we're unable to look in a more forward motion at preventing out-of-home placement. Do you have any of those kinds of concerns moving forward? You're projecting downward, and I just wanted you to reflect initially upon what happened in 2010 and what we were projecting in 2011, and share whether you were cautious based on any of those factors moving forward.
Commissioners, the numbers there, and for those of you that are wanting to see where those numbers are, they're on page HS5. And if you look under operating budget, about 3/4 of the way down, you'll see child placement -CHS. And you'll see a number of 13.9, just under 14 million for 2010 actual. And Commissioner Carter, I believe that's what you were referring to, correct? Of course, the 2010 and 11 budget was set 2 years ago. And so at the time, we were going on our experience in 2008 and 2009, which were what we were trending up. And we were worried, in fact, it was driving our budget decisions there, where we were having to cut other services in order to sustain this. And then it started to turn around and was going back down again. So that's why the actual figure for 2010 is actually around 14 million, when in fact we had budgeted significantly higher than that. And so that's why we had budgeted so high in 2011. At this point, and you can see then the drop of $5 million to 2012, as we talked about it in March, we thought this was realistic. I have to tell you, when you're pressed to make these choices, and you know that if you say it's 5 million versus 4 million, the difference is you're going to have to cut $1 million of services elsewhere in the budget. That does go into our thinking. We were pretty comfortable with that. Now, given the numbers that I've seen since March, I'm less comfortable with that, and that's why I was proposing to and asked our staff to see if we couldn't move some of the 2013 revenue into 2012 to help us in 2012 with that number. Commissioner, does that address your question?
And thank you, in particular as we see the cuts that help us to keep children out of home placement. The indicators of that number potentially going up become even more real. Thank you.
Well, our goal will always be to keep children safe. And if keeping children safe requires an out-of-home placement, that's what the court will decide. That's what we would recommend to the court, and that will increase our budget. But bottom line, that is a critical safety issue for us and just a real basic part of our function.
I appreciate your adapting. Thank you.
Commissioners McDonough, Redmond, and Ortiz.
Actually, my question was on the same page, same line, just going to be asked a little differently. On the 2011 budget, then, with the projections of where we're actually at, would you project that by the time we get to the 2011 actuals, that's actually going to be in that $13 million range, so that's going to be a $5 million over budget on that line?
Yes. We will be underspending that budget very significantly this year.
Commissioner Redmond.
They asked the question, I won't repeat.
Commissioner Ortega.
My question, I understand the issues you raised, Monty. I guess my question is, have you looked at how demographic plays, let's take out-of-home placement, just a fluctuation, have we looked at long-term in terms of the population, the age of young folks as we head forward?
We've certainly looked at that and talked about it. The number of children has been increasing demographically in the county the last couple of years, and yet we're seeing this decrease in out-of-home placement costs. So we can't draw too many conclusions from that. Year-to-year changes, and we budget, of course, on simply a 2-year budget. A demographic change over 1 year or 2 years isn't going to be significant enough to affect these dollars. A demographic change over 4 or 5 years, there's so many factors that enter into out-of-home placement. One, what's the economic status? What's the demographic status, or what you're raising? Number of kids. We can't draw a direct line to number of kids and number of kids that end up in our system. It's much more complex than that. Societal trends that we, frankly, don't totally understand. We don't totally understand why the number of kids in placement is significantly down. We think it's a good thing. We think it's good for kids. We hope it's because there's less abuse and neglect going on in our community. We hope the services that we have in place are being effective. But we don't have the ability to really know in the end what exactly is accounting for those changes.
Okay, no more questions.
Commissioners, a couple of other expenditure areas, then I'll be able to move on. Another expenditure area, we're showing a reduction in 2012 from 2011 is day training and habilitation for persons with developmental and intellectual disabilities. This reflects some of the strategies we placed in the budget 2 years ago that we talked to you about in the 2010-11 budget, and also it reflects some change at the state level in how the state defines the pool of dollars they give to counties for waivers. And so this is an area where we are able to project a decrease in spending by $1.5 million from 2011 into 12. And then we also just went through our budget line item by line item to see where else can we reduce spending. One area, actually, where we've been able to reduce spending is the sex offender treatment costs. Now, it's going to go back up some because of the legislation that passed, but our county attorney's office has been very effective at keeping individuals that they're going to commit, making that decision, they're going to try to commit, bring a petition to the court to commit, making that decision while the individual is still incarcerated in the criminal justice system. And by the county attorney's attention to this, they've been able to keep people out of the placement costs that we face when someone is awaiting a commitment hearing. So there's two kinds of expenditures for sex offender treatment. One is before the court has decided to send someone to that program, and we pay the full cost of that. The other cost is we pay a portion of the costs after they're placed, after they're committed. But that full cost of commitment, our county attorney's office staff have done a nice job in reducing those expenditures for us. And so that's an area we've been able to reduce by about $400,000, but now going to be partially offset by the state changing the percentage that we have to pay.
Commissioner Redmond.
And where would we find that in the budget document?
In the detail, I can give you that summary.
Yeah, but I mean, where in this budget book, where is it?
On HS 5, it would be in the line item in the operating budget, social services.
And then to find it, you'd have to look at the detail.
Yes, see,
That's a big category.
We do have a budget document with all the detail.
You're just going to have to cozy up a little tighter.
Is that where the day training is too? That's what you're asking for, that day?
See, and that's part of the complexity. And I had said this to Kathy right off the bat. I walked in and I said, I need to spend quality time with somebody because it's not, again, daylight.
I'm your person. I can spend the time.
Yeah, I'm not sure you want to be.
If you look at VTS 12. It talks about program changes, and it lists each one of those. So it's in here in a major change as well.
But it's still commingled all into one big dollar amount. And then I keep, Mr. Chair, I apologize.
Commissioner Redmond?
It's sort of commingled there, and then it says dollar amounts, but I keep on hearing these are guesstimates. Do you know what I mean? And so
Commissioner, all the information we'll make available to you. We build this from the bottom up, and you see when we have $160 million level, you see a summary level of the information because it incorporates a vast number of services and line items. We'll be happy to show you all that detail to see how we got to those conclusions. Commissioners, that was...
Tony?
Commissioner McDonough?
I'm going to go back to that because out of all those, the day trading was the biggest, about $1.5 million of that total number. Is this going back to a couple of years ago? We had a lot of testifying about some of the issues in the disability community. And I see you shaking your head, yes, but then, I mean, just by having this reduction number doesn't really give me a sense of, I mean, is this all the money we put towards day trading? Is there a bigger number? What's the impact of the cuts? What are we going to be hearing on this? Because we've already heard one time about this.
Commissioners, the change we proposed 2 years ago that you adopted is only a portion of the savings. A lot of the savings is because the state came through for Ramsey County because of redistribution formula. Ramsey County started doing better under the waiver, developmental disabilities waiver, than comparative to other counties. So we were able to place more people onto the medical assistance waiver. When that happens, the day training and habilitation costs shift from the county levy onto state and federal dollars. So the more people we put on the waiver, the less day treatment and habilitation, day training and habilitation costs are for the county levy.
There's no impact to the...
There's no impact to this projection for clients. There was 2 years ago when we changed the methodology. There is not from this. This is a budget estimate.
Can I follow up? And I'm probably drilling down deeper than what you'd like to give, but I mean, I can remember back in like 03 when they wanted to do like the rebasing that these waivers were kind of awarded. There was already a dollar amount attached when one opened up. It wasn't really based on maybe the need of who got that one. Is that some of the changes that's occurring at the state level where we're actually benefiting?
I'm going to ask Megan to come up and help, Commissioner, if I may. Commissioners, we are, Joe was just pointing out, as Megan comes up, he was just pointing out, we spent $2.7 million in 2010, and we're projecting now $2.7 million in 2012. We were able to reduce the projection. We were able to reduce the projection. We were thinking we were going to have to spend $4.2 million, but we're only going to have to spend 2.7. So, Megan Moses, our Director of Adult Services, and can help with these questions.
Sure. And Mr. Chair, maybe it would help if I just start at the beginning on this one. We did the budget reductions that we saw, Monty is correct, were in part from the policy changes that we proposed in the last budget, where you recall there was some conversation about moving to a matrix that we used so that the allocation that each individual received for day training and habilitation was based on their assessed need rather than just having any amount available to that person that they chose. So that was the amount that we projected, I think, in the 2010-2011 budget was based on the reduction we projected from that change. Now, this is an additional amount of savings we experienced because we benefited from a statewide change in how aggregate dollars were allocated for the DD waiver. We had more waivers than we expected. Therefore, we were able to shift more people over to the waiver and thus have their DT&H costs shifted to the waiver rather than off county property tax. And so this additional savings you're seeing is because of an unexpected, I guess, bounty of waiver slots that we didn't anticipate.
Again, since we're kind of opened this up, I'm just trying to connect the dots, and maybe I'm totally off base here. Tell me if I am. But I mean, I recall back in 2003, this is how far I'm going back. And, you know, at that time, these waivers were kind of, when they opened or were available, there was already a dollar amount attached to it. So somebody who got that one might not even need half that money to address their issues. Or somebody might get one that had a small dollar amount attached to it, but might really need a lot of services, and they might not ever get a waiver. They just timing, they got the wrong dollar amount attached. And there was a lot of get back at then to try to change that, to really try to base the waivers lined with service needs and dollars, but that was controversial because people were going to lose big chunks of dollars that they were already getting and getting extra service, or at least a high level of service. Is this kind of that thread to try to smooth all that out, or are there dollar amounts still attached to these and they're still not necessarily aligning with the, you know, the need for service? Or am I just not connecting the dots wrong and totally talking about something different?
Well, Mr. Chair and Commissioner, I think there is a connection to be made there. The rebasing that was attempted, I think it was in 2003, if I'm not mistaken, as I recall, that's getting to be a while ago now, was more trying to retrospectively go back and sort of reduce across the board what we were spending for individual people and individual budget items. I guess I see this as a little bit different because it was more directly related to needs. And so we were clearly tying it to a needs score, you know, on the assessment, and then how that translates to the vocational services needs score rather than across the board cut. And also it's different because that rebasing, as you recall, happened within the waiver. And this actually was for people, we were applying the matrix to people outside the waiver who were already on DT&H services, and then they would reduce to the matrix level rate, if that makes sense.
Mr. Reinhardt on this point.
Thank you.
We talked about the additional waivers that were available, but from what I understand, there are still waiting lists, or people that need waivers that haven't gotten them yet. I don't know if it's a waiting list, actually, not like childcare probably, but even with the additional waivers, there are still needs out there that aren't being met.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, we've experienced a little bit of a flip-flop. I think historically Ramsey County, as many other counties did, have a waiting list for what's called the DD waiver. And we, at the current time, we really don't have a waiting list for that DD waiver, which is the one where we received a bunch of slots, as well as we did for CADI. We do currently have an extensive waiting list for the CADI waiver. You've probably heard about that. It's about 300 to 400 people, and a lot of those, what we call priority 1 people who are waiting to get out of Anoka Metro Regional Treatment Center or a nursing home or another hospital that we simply aren't able to get out right now because we don't have the waiver resources to do that. So we do have it, again, on the CCT, the disability, CADI and TBI waivers, but really no waiting list currently for DD.
Thank you.
Commissioners, what we've been talking about the last several minutes are large expenditure categories, and so to remind you the big picture of where I am in my comments, to address this big problem that we had of a $4.5 million loss in state support for our work, and at the same time to address salary and fringe increases of about $1.5 million in 12 and another $2.5 million in 13. We came up with a number of strategies, revenue strategies, and now expenditure strategies. And the good news about these expenditure strategies is that we've been able to reduce our spending sufficient that otherwise we would have really had to cut into a lot of the, if you will, the muscle of our department and made us some cuts that we would have been very, very painful. Commissioners, I wanted to give you one other sort of major strategy that we use, and that's what I know you expect us to do. Rather than just work on revenue or just work on expenditures, we also have a constant effort to become more efficient in our work and use the dollars that you do give us much more efficiently. I think the overall theme has been for a number of years now, since 2003, is how can we become more efficient and do our work less expensively. We've had significant success here, and I want to in particular call attention to our work in the Financial Assistance Services Division. We've, over the last several years, last basically two to 3 years, we started using instant messaging, so we've used some technology resources. We use a phone answering service that we borrowed from Hennepin County and adjusted for Ramsey County to give our clients quick answers for easy questions on the phone. We're working, as you're well aware of, on electronic document management systems to try to move into a new era and using electronics for our files. We now actually have video of certain of our interviews are done for public assistance applicants. We have an extensive interview process that takes quite some time. We now do some of that explanation to clients by video, thereby doing it in groups rather than having individual workers work with each applicant. We have a call center. We're remodeling our lobby to become more efficient. We restructured some units. We've increased the number of appointments for our intake workers, and of course larger caseloads for our workers. And I gave you that list because we are being inundated by work in the public assistance area, and want to make sure you're aware of that. During the current 2-year budget cycle, we've increased by 8,300 cases. We have increased 5,000 cases this year. And so during this 18 months so far of the budget cycle, the first 18 months of this 2-year period, we've added the equivalent of the workload for 20 additional staff in the last 18 months. In March, when we prepared the budget, we predicted by the end of 2011 we would be at about 58,200 cases in public assistance. We are already past 59,000. So the reason for this growth is multiple, lots of reasons for it. Certainly the recession. Medical assistance programs is where it's growing the most rapidly, and the early opt-in for medical assistance that Governor Dayton proposed and has gone through now is helping our clients and helping the residents of our county. But what it's doing is shifting a lot of cases that were in Minnesota Care onto Ramsey County's caseload as medical assistance cases. And so that is an explanation of a large part of this year's growth. But our food support cases have increased significantly. Our cash-in cases have increased by much smaller numbers and smaller percentage. But the federal extensions for unemployment are going away, and so we're expecting we may be seeing some additional applications for cash assistance. To give a little longer perspective on this, as I mentioned, we are currently about 59,000 cases. The last time we added financial workers was when we had 41,000 cases. So we've essentially added 18,000 cases without additional workers, the equivalent of adding 45 caseloads of work without any additional staff. So if you would like to, when you talk to your constituents about an area of work where government has become more and more efficient, you can certainly point to this one. Our cost per case has been going down. It's because we've become more efficient in addressing the needs, and as I mentioned earlier in my comments, at the same time moved to same-day appointments. So we've increased our customer service. We've maintained our error rates at about the same rate, despite the fact that we've added 45 workers worth of work over the last several years. We have similar examples in the adult services and children's services areas, but I wanted you to be aware that we work hard on becoming as efficient as we can with the dollars that you do give to us.
Mr. McDonough.
Monty, I really applaud you and all your department for these efficiency things, and I think we'll need to continue to do them. My concern is the sense of balance and efficiency and accountability, and ensuring that because we're automating ain't the right word here, but becoming sometimes efficiency maybe allows for more abuse or things to move through or people or claims to move through the system with less eyes to ensure that the right people are getting the right help with public dollars. And I just want to make sure that you're paying attention to that as you're taking a look at this, because I've been as loud as anybody here that we've got to take a look at how we do business and make sure we're doing it extremely efficiently. But if we get too far on the other end without remembering what our responsibilities are when we have public dollars at hand here, and I just need to raise that and at least have some confidence from you that the thoroughness about making sure dollars are going where they're absolutely needed here is a part of this efficiency.
Commissioners, I guess my response would be, I don't think this is as much an issue that relates to automation as it simply does to caseload size. When our adult workers have caseloads of 500, which they're approaching, when you think about how many hours an average staff person works in a month, so 4 weeks, even if they were at 40 hours a week, and you know that's not the case because you have other things you have to do in the course of work, such as such as training, or we do give people lunch breaks. But if you work 160 hours and you have 500 cases, you've got 20 minutes per case per month. And actually, if you don't work quite 160 because of vacation or something else, then you're down to 10 or 15 minutes per case per month. You get a difficult case where you're dealing with some address changes or some complexity, or you think maybe there's a problem in the case that maybe someone's not giving us full information, you can eat up several hours. And now you've got a caseload of 500 with much fewer hours to pay attention to anybody else. So this is a concern of ours as well, Commissioner. And when I think that is a danger that we start to lose our ability to keep the system integrity, if you will, in its place to the degree we would like to keep it in place. And so I'm glad you mentioned it because we're concerned about it. We know that there are people that take advantage of our system. When we find that, when we see any sign of that, we take very aggressive action to try to correct that. But do people get away with some things because of their cheating the system? I'm sure they do. And unfortunately for us, I remember the day when we had financial workers with caseloads of 200 or 250. And when you've doubled that, your ability to pay attention, to be able to take something that doesn't quite look right and spend some extra time on that is severely limited.
Mr. Chair, Monty, I'm glad I asked the question because, I mean, the abuse is always going to be a part of the system. I mean, county commissioners make the headlines for abuses, and every field you can talk about that happens. And this is helpful because when, it's helpful to understand where the potential failure in the system is. And clearly, it's not in the efficiency side of the system. It's, in the case management side, and this helps perspective. And I think it's helpful for me because this comes up in the community all the time. I mean, I've got people in my community, they pay taxes, they understand, and they want to be a part of providing the safety net. But the headline sometimes distracts everybody from the real work because the real work isn't the headline. The headline is when something like out of the ordinary or at least an outlier is out there, and then that distracts us from what we're really doing. And it's really helpful for me to understand where the weaknesses are in the system for potential of those types of things.
And Commissioner, there are weaknesses in the system.
Commissioner Reinhardt.
I think it's also important to note, I know that Commissioner Bennett talks often about the fact that we're the implementation arm of the state, and I think especially it's no more obvious, I guess, than in the human services area, because there are a lot of folks out there that think we have a lot of flexibility on what the rules are, what we can ask for, what we can require, and in fact, most of that is mandated again at the state level where they have control over what those rules are. We don't have the option of saying, well, gee, we don't think that really seems right. I mean, we do, because then we go to the legislature to try to get changes made. But I do think also, again, the restrictions that are there that are mandated, that we're required to do things in a certain way, adds to that complexity. And, giving people more and more to do, obviously there's going to be more of a chance for something to slip between the cracks. And so, but I do think it's important to understand that the rules, we don't make them up. They're provided to us.
That's correct.
And we're doing our very best, and I think our staff is phenomenal in being able to take on these caseloads. And I know that they're very dedicated folks, but if you've only got 15 to 20 minutes, you can't expect miracles either.
Commissioner, maybe this is a little too deep for you, but an example is we do get computer, not to your intellectual understanding.
All right, Monty.
Well put. Can I start over again? I'd like to rephrase, Mr.
How many
Chair.
addendums did you want to?
May I rephrase? A little deeper than you want to understand. One of the things that we do, and people I think in the public won't realize that when someone applies for public assistance, there's a 28-page application and there's a lot of questions, and we follow up with banks, we follow up with car registration systems, and one of the systems that we match against is how much people are making. So we get a wage file, and our workers look at a wage file comparison of what's reported to us, and that when someone gets reported through the wage system, which is a whole different part of state government, and then our workers get matches and say, hey, these two numbers are different. So here's where some judgment comes into play. If it comes in and says someone made $500 last month, and you've got a report that shows they reported to you they didn't have any money, oh, this is a fraud referral, we're going to go after this. But when it comes in and says they made 150, and your report says they made 130, so is that a fraud situation or not when you've got 500 cases to pay attention to? And they get 100 of these a month, of these reports. So that gives you an illustration of where the financial workers that we employ have some judgment to apply. They're applying the state rules, as Commissioner Reinhardt was explaining, but it's very, very complex work because there's so much information and so much detail, knowing that if you decide to go down that route for that $20 difference in that report, because someone might be not telling you the truth, that's probably several hours of work that you're not going to be doing on something else. And so when your caseload is 500, that gap might grow a little before you spend some more time working on that case. So that's an illustration, Commissioner, where we aren't able to drill down as deeply as we would like. Commissioners, just a couple of other, they wind up, a couple of other strategies we use within the department. I want to assure you that our focus as a department is on delivering services to the residents of the county. So whenever we look at cutting services, whenever we looked at cutting budgets or reducing the rate of increase in a budget, we always look to administration first. Where can we cut in administration? And I'll report to you that back in 2003, we had 153 people in our administrative division, and now we have 113. We have reduced administration by 40 positions in the last 9 years. Administration is the basic business of what we do, so that's our collecting revenue, that's doing our accounting, that's managing the 600 contracts that we hold, it's keeping our computers going, and we're doing some new things. We have something called a quality assurance project. It's actually called Service Quality Assurance, and what we're doing is spending a lot of time working through with computer reports to ensure our documentation is solid, that our revenue is solid, making sure that we are practicing good business functions. But we're doing that with 40 less administrative staff than we had a few years ago. And I also want you to assure you that as we look at how we can reduce our spending, we have always asked the question, are we top-heavy? Do we have too many leadership staff compared to where we were before? And as I look at the numbers over the years, since 2003, we've reduced our division director staff by 20%, we've reduced our managerial staff by 12%, and we've reduced our supervisory staff by 10%, and our frontline workers are about the same as they were in 2003 in terms of numbers. So we've reduced 14 leadership staff for about the same number of frontline staff that we had back in 2003. So our work over those 10 years has been to let's ensure the best possible way we can keep as many frontline staff delivering services to the residents of the county as possible. Final comments, Commissioners, around the impact of the budget and the services not funded list. The major impact of the choices that we had to make this time are going to be on vendors. And you are aware that we rely on vendors for many, many services. We have more than 200 vendors that we purchase services from. We have been unable to help them deal with rising costs. For the last, since 2001, our average increase in a cost of living increase for our vendors has been 1% per year. since 2001. There was no increase in 2011 after a 1% increase in 2010. While vendors generally understand the county's budget problems, they have their own budget problems as well. We do receive requests for exceptions as they try to struggle with rising costs. And we've started to see some vendors that have really struggled financially and gone out of business in the last couple of years. Proposed in the budget is a cost of living increase of 1% for 2012 and 0 for 2013. So that's an area of concern that we have. In addition, we are proposing to eliminate or reduce 4 specific contracts in 2012. We look carefully at all of our contracts, and we've identified these as the contracts where we had the least impact on our clients. And then in addition, Commissioners, the budget reflects a reduction of 3 positions from 2011 to 2012. These are housekeeping changes that are related to reductions in grant funds. Commissioners, the context of the county manager's proposed budget for you is over the last 9 years, we've lost 107 positions in the department. We have struggled in recent years with that increased workload. As I indicated, we've added the equivalent of 45 workers worth of staff in our financial assistance services area alone in the last half a dozen years. Given that circumstance, this is a couple of final comments for you, Commissioner, before I ask you if you have more questions. I think the staff and many of the leaders are sitting in the audience behind me have just done a remarkable job of innovation, of creating a business mentality in our department where we need to be efficient with the dollars we have. We need to raise as much revenue appropriately that we can. We need to reduce expenditures wherever we can appropriately, at the same time keeping a focus of what we're all about, and that's going back to our mission of helping people survive and thrive. Are there some identified cumulative impacts of a series of budget reductions? I certainly think so. We will continue to monitor our budget and monitor the impact of the changes we're experiencing on our community. With that, Commissioners, I'd be happy to entertain any additional questions that you have.
Any additional questions, Commissioner McDonough?
I do. I'm on HS 13, and we talked a lot about out-of-home placements, but I just want to understand in the explanation of major changes number 7, and it talks about corrections responsible placements. The reduction in the 2012 budget doesn't quite line up with HS 5 in the child placement, and so I don't know if it's the same. And then the other question would be on the financing piece, the $2.1 million there. Is that actually property tax levy that was coming from corrections to help pay for this? That goes away then, or?
I'll ask Joe to help me, Commissioners. This for the Human Services budget is a wash. It is simply, the spending is reflected here, but an equal revenue that comes from corrections. If I'm not correct, please correct me, Joe.
For the corrections part of the portion of it, yes. The other would be Title IV revenue that we receive.
So is this number 7 though? Is this the child placement, CHS, HS5,
and corrections?
And then there's a line on that HS5 that says corrections, or that's not on this page?
It would be the total of the corrections and the human service portion.
I guess I just don't see the corrections line.
On HS5, right above child placement, CHS, you'll see social services, community corrections.
Okay, that's it.
So those two together are the same as the one.
The question then for Julie or for Lee, because it sounds like part of this reduction in financing of the $2.1 million is actually property tax levy that was coming from corrections. One of the things that I'm just going to raise in general, because as we move towards this, we're doing this in IS and more, when I started as a commissioner, I could pretty much look at financing and pretty much assume that was outside dollars. But less and less that assumption is accurate. More and more of that is actually levy dollars coming somewhere else within our county. And I don't know if it would be wise, I don't want to complicate things, but also want to have some sense of understanding when we're doing financing, whether if it's going up, sometimes it's actually levy dollars because we're billing somebody else for the service or something. if we don't have some way of identifying in the financing, you know, with an asterisk or something, that if those are actually levy dollars or outside dollars, I'm not saying yes or no, but I think we should have the conversation so me as a commissioner can kind of look at this and say, okay, that's an increase or decrease in this budget, but it really is still levy dollars somewhere else in this county.
Finance Director Merkins, will you have a comment?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner McDonough, we understand what you're saying. Actually, at the conclusion of today's budget hearing, we're going to be handing out some new spreadsheets that show a different way of summarizing departmental, and I'm sorry Commissioner Parker isn't here because it's largely at her urging, but a different way of summarizing overall expenditures and revenues in the county, as well as department by department, to be able to see more of a multi-year trend in these specific different revenue lines and expenditure lines. So that'll be our first pass at trying to provide maybe some more of that information. Take a look at that, and all of you let us know if that you find that helpful or if you want more information, more detail. We try to, in that, we're trying to make the distinction more of when we say financing, what are the revenues that don't include the levy dollars, and trying to make sure it's easier to understand the year-to-year comparisons.
Thank you.
Mr. Evans.
I think you did a great job in terms of saying that, and I think in several of the other departments we've said, well, you show a tax increase, but actually it's because of this, or you show a tax decrease because it is levy going in and out and things like this. And I think that really would help tremendously, because it's just, again, and I'm not trying to be, I'm not saying it was an overt thing. I'm just saying it doesn't make it transparent, because levy dollars are levy dollars. They're still coming out of the same pocket. And I think if you show a decrease here, but you show an increase somewhere else, then I think we should at least know where it's coming from. So I concur with what Jim said on that.
Any additional
So
questions?
I think the first pass will do it. Oh, I've got a question.
Mr. Redmond.
Lee wanted to talk.
Actually, it was me, Mr. Chairman, if you...
Finance Director Merkins.
Mr. Martin, I just wanted to give you an opportunity, if you wish, to spend a moment to talk about what, if any, federal changes you see coming down the pike. We put together this budget before the state budget was adopted, before the federal debt ceiling was raised, and we started getting some foreshadowing of changes at the federal level. Is there anything that's sort of on your radar screen, or things that are on your watch list that are happening in Washington that either might affect the regulatory side of your agency or the federal funding side that you'd want to just make a mention to today, of things that we should be aware of as we get into this upcoming biennium, things that make you nervous, or maybe everything's fine?
Grim, grimmer, and grimmest.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Merkins, yeah, there are some things on our radar screen, certainly for the residents of the county, and I'll get to the specific about the budget. And I would also ask if any of my staff have additional items they're worried about. In terms of the residents of the county, certainly the whole medical care system being in transition as it is, with very differing political views of where we should end up as a country, where we should end up as a state, bears watching for us, because all of that has implications for us as a governmental entity who spends a lot of money on medical care. So that is certainly an area we continue to watch. A much more specific area is what's called Title 20. This is a social services block grant, basically, from the federal government. It has stayed the same for about the last 10 years, and every time there's a debate about cutting the federal budget, this is an area where the federal government, Congress, starts to look. In the past, this board has done a very nice job going to bat for the social services block grant money. Joe, do you know how much money? $4 million per year in federal dollars that we get, and that's one that I think bears very close watching. I'm concerned about that one in particular.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Redmond.
Page 27. Do you know, under total discretionary, and I know it added all up the previous pages, the 3.788, what we did in 10 and 11,
For total discretionary?
correct?
Offhand.
We'll have to look, Commissioner, I don't know.
Okay.
We don't have that
Because,
information with us.
you know, I tried, again, I tried to find it in here because I think, you know, although, you know, out of a $160 million amount, you know, it's very limited. But on the other hand, I'd like to see where that is
We will check and get back to you, Commissioner.
what has been our history over the past few years on that, because Commissioner Reinhardt had said at the very beginning that most of this is mandated, and if we do it, it's sometimes mandated discretionary, and sometimes it's discretionary mandated, and pretty much it appears that we've sort of gotten rid of discretionary mandated.
That's pretty correct, Commissioner.
You know, well, it's a real blank line.
Real blank line, that's correct. That would be a 0.
Unless you use disappearing ink on me, but I just wondered, I'd like to see that.
Just in case people that are listening are wondering how you can have something that's discretionarily mandated, it's if you choose to do something, then how you do it, the level of service and so forth is mandated. And what this means is that we are not choosing to do things that are discretionary. We're going with what is mandated. There are some discretionary items, but I think that what you're going to find is that most of that is probably in prevention. But, you know, getting that information would be helpful.
And I sort of went through and was trying to literally just go through the discretionary, and it covers the spectrum of several.
Quite a few different places in the budget.
You know, umbrella groups. And so I just want to know where we've been on that. May I?
You may, Commissioner Redmond.
I don't want to occupy time if others have questions.
I think the questions are pretty much done, except for you.
Or well, I'm not done. But I will.
So we'll leave you and Janice to finish the meeting.
And he will say, you can't leave.
Mr. Chair.
Come on, Commissioner Redmond. We all love you.
Thank you. I'll accept that.
Of course, I could leave her as chair of the committee. Well, I'm fine, because she's my vice chair.
Well, Mr. Chair, I thought that we would be remiss if we didn't talk about HS 49 and 50. That's in regards to the aging population, which has been one of the heartbeats that we've had some discussion about. And I thought that we at least should have some discussion. And again, I couldn't find it in the spreadsheet nor in here in terms of, do we already show the potential loss of some of the, do we show being able to keep the home delivered meals, what amount, that type of thing in here?
Commissioners, we have, for the last several years, had about $205,000 in our budget for that purpose, and it is still in the budget, has not changed.
Okay. And would I see that somewhere?
In the detail. In the detail, yes, you would.
Not in the document.
Not in the document, not in
Is
the
it
50.
in the social services or is it in the
600401 detail.
604? You just curl those off so nicely. So that remains constant in this budget.
In social services, yes.
Okay, and I think that at some point in time we're going to have more discussions on that, correct? Or
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Reinhardt.
Because the amounts are so similar, it's gotten confused at times, but the 205 or 209, whatever it is, was what we had put in all along. Last year we put in an additional 200,000 that was one-time money. They are not the same. My understanding, and I know from this budget and going through it, that what we had always provided in the past to help support that consortium get the meals out to seniors and those that are disabled is still there. The $200,000, which again was one-time money, is not.
Her budget was Julie's budget too, I believe.
That's what I'm saying. It's not in Julie's budget. Right. But because the amounts are similar, it was, it got confusing too. I know some people that were calling me and saying, wait a minute, is it there, isn't it? And I said, well, it depends on what you're talking about. What's it?
Well, but
because the base funding is still there, but not the one-time.
But I think that if there is going to be any addendum or any requirement or anything like this, that we have to tidy that up at some point in time between now and the end of October or November, whenever.
Well, Mr. Chair, on this,
Commissioner McDonough.
wasn't that one-time money actually put in Julie's budget, in the county manager's budget to manage in dispersing the funds?
Manager Kleinschmidt.
I thought we put it in your budget.
No, we transferred it into CHS.
Kathy?
We transferred it into CHS, but it was one-time fund balance.
Was transferred into CHS. Commissioner Reinhardt.
I believe, though, what we did was we directed the county manager to come up with a method for distributing it, but it actually came through DHS. So you're right. I mean, there was a lot of additional, try to figure out how to do this was delegated to the county manager's office.
Manager
And so,
Kleinschmidt. Sorry.
well, I was just going to say, in answer to a partial answer, anyhow, to Commissioner Rettman's comment, is I believe that we are in agreement that the base would stay, unless I haven't heard anybody say that it shouldn't.
Yep, but
So if there's going to be an addendum, I would assume it would deal with if we wanted to do additional funding. But the question of the base funding, I think that we're all in agreement on that. And again, this is something that's being watched very closely, and so I don't want to give a misnomer to anyone out there. I'm stealing your words now, Commissioner Rettman, that's in jeopardy, because I don't believe it is.
And Mr. Chair, what I am saying is that there is a possibility that we may need to take some action before the end of the year if we see that we are going to take a different direction, or depending on the direction we take, in terms of, do we try and the redeployment and or whatever, and if we choose to aggressively pursue the truly the 5 meals a day, hot meals a day, those types of ramifications that we were talking in the discussion about, that this clearly, I wanted to see how much the base was for sure, and whether or not there needed to be any other action before the end of the year, before we get the budget all tidied up.
Well, and Mr. Chair, I think much of that depends on what's coming out of MAAA, Metropolitan Area Agency on Aging, and the stark reality of that is that we're not going to have that information before we have this wrapped up. It was supposed to be done earlier. It's not going to be done, and I know that Commissioner Parker is hot on the trail of that to make sure that the moment any information is available, we'll get it. But I suspect that we are not going to have an answer to that.
But it may leave some things in limbo.
Yes.
That clearly need to be on our radar, that may have some financial tails potentially, and I at least want to have that as a acknowledgement here, so that we at least try and accelerate what MAAA should have done a year and a half ago, in my humble opinion, which doesn't sound real humble on that, because one of the things very quietly is there's the aging population and there's the CADI waivers, that some of them have been done together, not done together, those types of things. So there's some complexities here. And the census data that you address, even before the 2010 population, census tract came out, talks about the aging population, and the increase, it was just said at a base, it's a 2% increase in the number of seniors being served over the 2011 estimate, but you're ramping up with more and more that will be eligible or to potentially need some home-delivered meals, and that's what I'm trying to do is address that, which is totally different than the block nurse program and those types of things. So you have a sort of a one going up and one going sideways or backwards or something like this, and I just think we need to have it on our radar screen, and I think we all do, but I also felt like if I didn't at least mention it here I thought Jan would have mentioned it, so I'm probably not doing, I'm not speaking for her, I'm just saying that she would have had that on the radar, and the number of elderly waivers are still remaining pretty constant according to your projections on page 49, but the number of homebound, continues to edge up, yet the vulnerable adults, on different pages are showing a pretty much a stable numbers of clients, not necessarily an increase dramatically, which I think is really good in your detail, which I appreciated a lot. Mr. Chair, most of my questions, I have a feeling I'm going to have to spend with either Kathy or Joe or both, or Lee, or somebody, because I think it would be a waste of y'all's time, because, I need to understand that, because, and the other questions I'll put in writing for everybody, but at least I just couldn't find a lot of the answers, and I just think it would be disrespectful of your time to ask them all here, and y'all go, what the heck is she talking about? But realize you too could have your own spreadsheets from Kathy. She autographs them if you would like, though she's never autographed mine.
Well, and I would just like to comment that as this meeting started today, we were talking about the number of questions and the complexity of this particular budget. And I made the comment that I didn't have as many questions as I'd had in the past. And part of that is because there have been such dramatic cuts that there wasn't a lot left. Your department has weathered these storms, and when I talk about the department, I'm talking about really the services that you provide to the most vulnerable in our community. And I am continually impressed with the care and dedication and love that these services are provided to the most vulnerable, the children, the elders, those with disabilities, mental health issues. That's the safety net that we always talk about, and sometimes we just talk about it in terms of the number of FTEs or the revenue that's coming in or the department, when really, when you hear all of the questions that we've all been talking about, it's about the individuals that are being served within our community for this very important safety net.
Commissioner McDonough.
And I'm just going to say really briefly, and I'll probably say it again at the end, because Commissioner Reinhardt, I think my feelings entirely exactly like yours, but even to a greater degree. In 11 budgets I've been through, and a lot of them have been a lot easier, but we've had to spend a lot more time on them, and partly why I think this is the case, and I want to, it's not just Monty, it's all the department heads and Julie, is this could be one of the toughest budgets we've had to do, but I think it's one of the ones that most closely aligns with the work we've done with our mission, vision, values, and goals. And when we recognize we've got to cut, it was in line with those. And I think when we have more questions or when we have a bigger issues about what's going on with our budget, it's when it's not necessarily aligning with what the board has taken as a position for mission, vision, value, and goals. And I would argue that this is, even though this is one of the most difficult budgets we've had to do, at least for me, and I think you've recognized, I have maybe the least number of questions I've had than other budgets, just because I see that in the budget. I see it all the way through the budget.
Commissioner Reb.
One more, Mothers First, was that funded with the state money or not?
At a reduced level, yes.
So
We're able to continue the Mothers First program.
Will it be
I believe it's federal dollars that came through the state.
Okay, and so it'll stay at the same level. I couldn't find that either, but that's one of the ones where I do think, and we were talking about it yesterday at the Healthy Family Alliance, and that's one of the reasons is you basically have a triage system where you have everything from mental health to child protection to chemical dependency, to public health nurse, and all of this, and you're basically trying to get, a parent clean before giving birth, but then you also have the continuity of service that could put a kid in a really phenomenal trajectory that otherwise would not be done, and it's been sort of cross-departmental. Very, very quietly done, but it's just one of those things that came up when we were at the Healthy Families, when I was at the Healthy Families yesterday, that the results-oriented type of thing, it takes the staffing to put all those things together, but it may, have incredible results in the long run.
Commissioner, Mothers First is one of the programs where the payoff for society, financially and for the children involved, is incredible. Of course, Mothers First is our program for expectant mothers, where we help them stay substance-free during their pregnancy. And as you might imagine, the cost of a baby that's born with toxins in their system from fetal alcohol system or other kinds of problems over a course of a lifetime is in the $1 million+ to society, to health plans, to schools, to criminal justice systems, etc. And we're dealing with between 50 and 100 of those children being born each year with a very high success rate, probably in the 80-90% of keeping those babies tox-free. And the program right now is run for about $900,000 per year. That's federal money now, comes to us from the state. There's been 2 or 3 occasions where we've had to step in or with local dollars in order to keep the program going, but at least for the foreseeable future, including this budget period, it appears as if the federal government will continue to fund it.
It's just one of those things that we need to highlight every now and then because it is a phenomenal potential, and I think it's the child protection workers to the nurses. It's really doing the job.
Commissioner Carter.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to acknowledge also the incredible work that you and your team have done managing to an environment where the need is greater and the resources are increasingly less. You've been creative and you've been innovative and you've done such good work. I also want to thank you for your support of the work that is happening at the state to look at results and outcomes and plan to have a more effective way of working in Minnesota with the resources and the partnership that we have with the state based on planning for those outcomes. And you've been a leader in that work as well. I want to thank you for your staff support, yourself, Cam Calliners, who has assisted with the committee process and really has provided staffing to that work. Others on your staff who have come in and provided support from time to time. I think that your leadership and the leadership of our staff and the direction that you have set is lauded across our state, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Any additional comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll remind the folks out there in TV land, we have 2 public hearings. One September 6th, that's Tuesday at 1 p.m. in the courthouse. If you'd like to speak, sign up that day, or you can call the clerk at the number that will be on the screen just shortly. And sign up. We'll take them in the order they come. Hopefully you will make comments, not just cut, but tell us where the cuts should go. The second meeting will be at the public hearing will be Monday, November 28th, 6:30 p.m. at the Roseville Area High School, 1240 County Road B2, between Hamlin and Lexington, on B2, which is the 1st Street north of Highway 36. This budget meeting is adjourned.